Line and Dan Beaver. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're good. We're sitting here in the middle of a winter storm Rocky, watching the sleet and snow come down out the window, thinking of how nice it would be in Phoenix this coming weekend. You dog.
Yeah. We pay for it a couple of months out of the year, but it's certainly worthwhile at this time.
Yeah, I would think it would be. Okay, did anything, before we get to Phoenix and talking fantasy predictions for the race at Phoenix, did anything really surprise you in the Daytona 500 fantasy racing-wise?
There's no way I can say that Jimmy Johnson didn't surprise me. I said all week, avoid him like the plague, and there he is leading them to the checkered flag. Numbers were sound, the reasoning was sound, but that's why they run the race. There's very little that's predictive where plate races are concerned, but given his record, you had to think something was going to happen, and it didn't. And since it didn't, he won.
Yeah, he was. I actually made a prediction with about 150 about 150 miles to go that he was going to win the race. It was kind of an off-the-cuff comment, just because where he was sitting, and it looked like a Jimmy Johnson race to me. Typical, kind of lull him until the last pit stop and then run away with it, and that's kind of the way it did play out. I do understand though why you would not pick him for a plate race at the beginning of the season. You just got to use him at places like Phoenix coming up or like Las Vegas, correct? So there's my segue into the relatively flat mile track out at PIR. Talk to us about Phoenix.
Well, I've got a little bit of a hesitation here because some of that rationale that I used last week for why you would pick drivers like Matt Kenseth and Jeff Burton exists this week also. They didn't do particularly well. Blown engine and crashes, again, are not predictable. But you look at someone like Brad Keselowski, who in 2011 didn't thrive on short, flat tracks. He had a second in New Hampshire that year, and everything else was outside the top 10, and almost everything else was outside the top 15. Then he found the rhythm, and he was the only driver last year to rattle off top 10s in all 8 races at Martinsville, Phoenix, New Hampshire, and Richmond. So I would say he's definitely one of the favorites, but given the fact that the sport can be cyclical, he could revert to his 2011 skills as well. So I think Phoenix is it's nice to be back on a track that's a little more predictable. Short, flat tracks are probably the most predictable of all the courses that are out there, but Keselowski proved last year that drivers can pick up the pace or drivers can fall off. So you got to watch practice, you got to watch qualification.
How much does the new Gen 6 car, the fact that this is the first non-plate race for it, how does that affect your predictions? I mean, can you just figure that's a color that everybody's colored with, or are there some teams that would be better with a new car than others?
I think it's fairly obvious that some teams will be better. Someone's going to hit on it. It's going to be a crew chief that this works for. It's going to be a driver that this works for. We don't know that yet, though. We don't know who that's going to be. I'd be fairly confident that it's going to be someone. For now, we don't know what the impact is going to be, and I think the cream's going to rise to the top. Jimmy Johnson's going to continue to run strong. Denny Hamlin's going to continue to run strong. But someone in that middle of the pack is going to come out strong. And in retrospect, it's going to be because of the Gen 6 car.
Were you surprised at all by the performance of the 29 car at Daytona, since Harvick is pretty much a lame duck, and it was that was not the Chevy that I would have expected to be the best of the weekend.
No, same here. Although you had Burton, his teammate Burton, who was great last year. Clint Boyer was great for that organization back before he left for Toyota. Harvick's been a little unlucky and a little impatient in the draft sometimes, and he didn't have anything to lose this year, so I guess that might have calmed him down quite a bit for all those preliminary races. And he probably would have been just as good in the big race if it hadn't been for the unfortunate event. It took him and Stewart out at the same time.
Yep.
So, yeah, I was a little surprised. He wasn't on my He was on one of the provisional rosters, I believe. I didn't activate him and felt pretty good that I didn't activate him. But then when Tony Stewart also got swept into that same incident, then a lot of people's rosters went down in flames.
Yep. Well, we got about 3 minutes to go, Dan. Can you give us a quick rundown of what you think people should do with their Yahoo team, for example, and then maybe just an overall pick for Phoenix?
I think Denny Hamlin has to continue to be a top pick on this type of track with his victory last year and his second-place finish in both Phoenix races. I think that Kevin Harvick is going to have to be looked at for the same reason. Finished second in the first race and won the fall. And those are the A drivers that pop up quickly. Keselowski is also there. If you don't want to start Hamlin, you want to save him for a little bit later in the year, then Hamlin's a great alternative. Moving to B, I think you're looking at probably Dale Earnhardt because he's going to ride the momentum. He was uneven on plate tracks last year, but he started off really strong with the 14th at Phoenix and then 3 top 5s, another pair of top 15s. So if you already have him on your roster from last week, I'm not sure how long he's going to be strong. He tends to go up and down. You might as well use him now. Second plate driver, second driver in Group B would probably be Mark Martin. Again, you're not going to get a chance to use him too often. He's really good on this. He didn't start all the short flat track races last year, missing Martinsville and New Hampshire, but he swept the top 10 in the other races. And then to see, I'm going to pick up probably Danica Patrick. She had her best finisher last year. She might have challenged for a top 10, if not for that last lap crash. She's coming off the momentum from Daytona, and while that doesn't predict what she's going to do on an intermediate track, on any of the unrestricted tracks, she still has an extra pep in her step, and she proved that she can defy predictions, that she can run a lot faster than people think she can. So I think Danica's got to be someone you look at in Group C. Yeah,
she did do all those things. Okay, we'll put you on the spot. If you have to pick one, just pick a driver to win. Who's your pick this week at Phoenix?
I always liked Denny Hamlin on the short flat track, so he's got to be my guy.
Denny Hamlin, I don't. It's hard to disagree with you there. He is Dan Beaver. You can follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race. He is the director of fantasy racing for NASCAR.com. Also writes fantasy for YahooSports.com. Dan, thanks again for your time. Sorry we had to cut a little bit short, but we ran over a little bit with J.J. Ailey on his interview. So we'll talk to you next week, man. Thanks a lot.
I will be here.
All right. Dan Beaver. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. He's just really good stuff at Fantasy Race. If you're not already, if you're a fantasy fan, you already are probably.
Absolutely.